Start.
Welcome to the Flavor of Fantasy Cogs&Wheels discussion panel. Guys, my name is Michelle Cornwell-Jordan, and I will be the moderator today, and I'm so excited because I have the opportunity to chat with these very talented authors. So let's not take up too much time. Let's jump right into it. We're going to start with the wonderful author Jeffrey Cook. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Jeffrey Cook. I am an author living near Seattle, Washington. Currently, I have 6 books out, plus a number of short stories and novellas in a series of charity anthologies. I am the author, most applicably for these panels, of the award-winning Dawn of Steam's trilogy. Dawn of Steam First Light, Gods of the Sun, and Rising Suns.
Awesome.
Nice.
I am also one of the authors for and head organizer of the Writer Punk Project, which is a series of charity anthologies. So far, we have done science fiction adaptations of Shakespeare plays, with all of the profits benefiting Paws Animal Rescue in Linwood, Washington here. The first anthology was Sound and Fury, Shakespeare Goes Punk. December 1st, we will be releasing Once More Unto the Breach, Shakespeare Goes Punk Volume 2, once again benefiting the charity, which we have successfully this year fully funded a big dog kennel for a year, and we're hoping to double that next year.
Very, very cool. I am so excited about everything that you're doing over there at Writers Punk. I just can't wait to get involved. Awesome. Well, next up, we're going this way, is the wonderful Miss author Andrea Hintz.
You need to unmute her.
There you go. Hi. That'd help if you can speak, right?
Oh, I have the power of speech.
You got the power of speech.
Thank you. Andrea Hintz. I am a beginning author, blogger, steampunk enthusiast.
Mm-hmm.
I review steampunk books mostly by indie authors, including Jeffrey Cook. And I do that on my blog, themanuscriptdetective.com.
Very cool.
And that's it.
Very nice. All right. Looking forward to chatting. All right. And then next up is author Jonathan Fesmire.
Hi, sorry if he stole the show a little bit.
Hey, hello.
This is my son, Clark.
Hi, Clark.
Clark, say hi.
Hi.
Good job. So, yes, I'm I used to write fantasy primarily. Now I write primarily steampunk. Let's see, where do I start? So I have a couple of fantasy novels out, Children of Rotlan and Tamtree Zemp, and I should have shown paper copies, but I'm currently working on my first steampunk novel called Bodacious Creed, a steampunk and there's a whole big story about that, how I got it funded through Kickstarter, but we can talk about that in the books panel. And I run a blog called the Mostly Steampunk blog.
Mm-hmm.
And subscribers to my the newsletter generally, like, just I announce when there's a new blog post and say a little bit about it, maybe something extra. Subscribers to my blog get some of my fantasy short stories, and I just finished my my son got them for me.
Awesome job.
Nice job.
Yeah. So so what was I saying? You're distracting me. I just finished a short story called The Obstructed Engine. It takes place in the same world as Bodacious Creed, and that's free to my newsletter.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty cool story. So, and there will be more freebies for them too. So, in the future. So.
All right, and we can probably chat a little bit more about that at the end. And what we're going to do is we're going to jump right into it.
Yep.
Okay, guys, for this panel, let's just remember we can keep our thoughts and responses a little bit brief, and we'll just keep it on moving. So first up, and this question I'm going to start with is, what does steampunk mean to you? What is steampunk? I've heard so many different things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's traditionalists, there's, what does it mean? First up, Jeffrey.
So because I do a lot of convention things, I get that question a lot, and my quick and easy answer usually is 1800 style science fiction. But can be a lot of science fiction which is based around steam technology and the transition clockwork into steam and before like light era.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jeffrey.
Oh, just said that it can be a lot of science fiction based around steam technology, where that's a driving force in defining technology for the world, but typically set in the 1800s.
All right. Very, very cool. How about you, Andrea?
I have to say I mostly agree with Jeffrey. Anytime you have something that you're going to call steampunk, it needs to involve the steam era, which means basically the early 1800s to the early 1800s.
Something happened.
Basically, you want to have some sort of steam, involved in your steampunk. If you don't have steam, a steam engine or something like that, it's not really a steampunk. That's just me.
True. Very cool. All right. How about you, Jonathan?
Sorry, trying to get my volume okay here. So I agree with both of them, and I like Jeffrey's. I generally say Victorian retrofuturism, but Jeffrey has it more right. The 1800s, or I think for me more mid to late 1800s, early 1900s era science fiction with steam as like some as an element, and because it can be anywhere in the world. So like my current story is in the Wild West, which I know it seems like most steampunk is Victorian, some is Western, but there's some great stuff from all over the world. You'll have Japan at the time or whatever. So it can be I mean, because if you think about it, if the technology's there, it's going to be all over the civilized world.
True.
There's a huge range for some really amazing stories, and so since we're just going for a definition, I think that's good.
All right. And what I've seen that is curious is that although it has been around, and please correct me if I am wrong, since the 80s, somewhere underground, it is now receiving this massive amount of attention. Though there are many out there that I've read or seen that they talk about being traditionalists. What does that mean to you, being traditional in steampunk? Jeffrey?
Okay, well, the first real steampunk novels, or the things that are now included in steampunk, were actually written in the 1960s, like Queen Victoria's Balm.
Mm-hmm.
The first group that called themselves the Steampunks were Powers, Blaylock, and Jeter. Starting in 1979 with their coalition. They were sort of adherents of Philip K. Dick. K.W. Jeter coined the term steampunk in 1987, referring to the work of those three authors and saying he thought it was going to be the next big thing as a follow-up to cyberpunk,
right,
as a genre. So it's been going for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the traditionalist is probably from before, I believe it was 2006, with the big splash with the working steam engine going to Burning Man, which really, for 2 years in a row, 2006, 2007, which drew a lot of attention to the aesthetic and look among the culture. So the literature and knowing who Jeter and Blaylock and Powers were, Gibson and Sterling and some of the original proliferation.
Very cool. Andrea?
I have to say, again, I agree with Jeffrey completely on this.
Yay, Jeffrey!
I do panels on this stuff.
The traditionalists, as far as from a literature standpoint, you got to go with Jeter, Blaylock, Powers, all of those guys. Basically, you need to start there, you know, and read that, and that gets you a good basis to start from. And then you can go and branch off and do your own thing, you know. But traditional, that's where you start, I think.
Very cool. Jonathan. All right. How about you, Jonathan?
Could you repeat the question?
What does traditionalist or you know, being traditional in steampunk mean to you?
I got into steampunk a little later. I've liked it for a long time, but I got really into it about 5 years ago. So honestly, I'm still catching up on the literature. But so to me, it means kind of the whole the Victorian setting.
Right.
But it also, to me, it actually goes back to Jules Verne and H.G. Wells. You know, I mean, Verne came up with these, you know, amazing ideas for what, you know, for automata and all sorts of things. And, you know, and H.G. Wells had the time machine. I've actually been thinking it'd be fun to do it, a steampunk time travel story, kind of in that tradition, you know. So for me, it kind of actually goes back to them, and they were living in that time. And obviously, it wasn't called steampunk until much later, again, because it seemed a natural name for it after cyberpunk, which I was a big fan of cyberpunk too.
Yeah.
There was a role-playing game that was great. Of course, William Gibson, Neuromancer. So, yeah. So I think that's kind of what it means to me, is really going way back actually to Verne and Wells, to sort of the source.
Right. And I'm also pretty new to it. I'm going to be honest. What drew me was, you know, of course, that exists. But my question is, I've noticed that, you know, there seems to be a debate. I don't know how really big, but that, you know, that is going mainstream. It's more of those that adhere to the traditional view are maybe not as pleased at that. What do you think with it going so mainstream now? And a lot of the times, many people that take it up have no idea of anything that you just said, and I was one included. So I'm learning, but you know, we are drawn by the look. So what do you think about that? I mean, we have the game shows, steampunk. We have the movies. You know, we have different things. What do you think, Jeffrey, about the mainstream now?
I think it is, and I think one of the big appeals of steampunk is the visual elements, and that there's so much to it. I mean, yes, the literature has been around for ages. There's, you know, Wells and Verne, there's the rich history, but you don't necessarily have to be into that. You can be a crafter. You can be in it for the fancy dresses and tea parties and social aspect. I mean, out here in the Pacific Northwest, Portland, Vancouver, Victoria, and Seattle all have their own just steampunk conventions.
Wow.
So within, you know, a 4-hour drive,
I want to come.
over the years. Yeah. So, you know, and I am attending most of them now as a, you know, author and panelist and everything. So I get to see that and see the culture and how it's grown. It's huge out here.
That's so
I think, yes, it is definitely going mainstream, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
Very cool. Very cool. Andrea?
Well, I started out because I'm a big reader, you know, and I started out by picking up, I want to say a Gail Carriger book.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And that's, you know, that's pretty mainstream now.
It is, yes.
And I'm like, what is this steampunk thing? What is this? So I read more. I read all her books, and I read everything else I could find. And then I wanted to know where it came from. So I started reading, you know, Jeter and Blaylock and Powers and everybody else. And so I approached it from that standpoint. Then once I kind of dove in head first, I started getting involved with the making and, you know, going to conventions and things. I had a friend who just kind of randomly invited me to go to a steampunk convention when I was in Texas. she just wanted to go for fun. She wasn't involved in steampunk at all, and we went, and it was the best time I ever had. And that's kind of how I did it. And it is getting more mainstream, and I think that the mainstream has helped bringing more people into the group, and I think that's a good thing. Not everybody agrees. I've seen on the forums and things like that are a little peeved that their special little snowflake is not as special anymore because everybody has a snowflake now, and they all put their gears on it, and now have a geared snowflake. So throw some gears on it, right?
Just throw some gears on it. How about you, Jonathan?
Well, I mean, I think it's all geek culture is becoming more and more popular.
Right.
I mean, it's exploded. I mean, it's it's the stuff that I was into in my teens and 20s. That it was in my teens, especially, very select group. And I'm still somewhat in my 20s, but in the last 20 years, especially the last 5 years. Okay, down. In the last 5 years, everything's gotten huge with all the superhero movies and everything. I mean, we had the Steampunk TV show recently. So I think it's great. Honestly, it's like, I think it's like finally people are seeing that we were onto something, that we're like, and I don't think it needs to be an exclusive club. I understand wanting to have your own little group, but it's not like you still can't have your own group of friends. And we're all special. We all have something to share. So, and there are people who are going to be into it but not creators. I think it's especially good for creators, for makers and artists and writers, because now we have kind of a bigger platform.
Very cool.
My son wants to send a message, so
that's fine.
He's typing in a message. I just wanted to make sure he didn't close anything.
That's fine. But I agree with you guys that I think that it's opening up to everyone only helps the genre, versus hurting it. So I think that it's great that it is going mainstream. What are the personas? Okay, I've heard several of you mention it, and so for those, and I'm just learning, and for those that may be watching, what are these personas? I hear makers a lot. I hear, just different things. Break it down for us, Jeffrey. What are the personas of steampunk?
Yay! So I think that's one of the areas that is still really being defined. At YERCCon in Portland this year, we had a big panel trying to represent the different faces of it, and we had authors. We had Nathaniel Johnstone from the Nathaniel Johnstone band, and tying in like Abbey Park is local. We had the crafters. And we had a couple of the people that were just there for like the Rise of Aster, the role players, and the very end of the personas and the look and the tea parties and dress more than anything. So I think those kind of covered the big categories. But then there's a lot of people who are really like sampling a little bit of everything or still figuring out.
You can mute me if you need to, by the way, just so people can hear Jeffrey.
Okay.
Or I can, I guess. I can.
Jeffrey, do you have a persona? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, I am an author. I am definitely not a crafter. I mean, even the hat was made for me by one of my fans. So I enjoy the social aspect, but when I do go to conventions, I'm usually there as a vendor and as a panelist, and that's pretty much my role within it is, creating worlds, but also, I guess, as a little bit of an educator, because I do, the What is Steampunk, the Writing Steampunk panels, and the one I'm really doing a lot lately is non-Victorian steampunk.
Oh.
Talking about the long 19th century and the origins of steam power, and what settings and parts of the world you could have steampunk in at what points of time.
Very, very cool. Then that's a great resource. I actually, would love that, while writing. That's awesome. Very cool. Andrea, how about you? Personas?
Oh, I forgot what we were talking about for a second there. Well, for me, a persona, and whether or not you're a maker or, crafter or something like that, are not necessarily together. Some people have a persona that they use when they go to conventions where they're, an airship captain or whatever, and that's how they dress appropriately, to look like a captain when they go out. And they might not have made anything. They might not have made any of that. And personally, I like to make my own things when I can.
You're a maker.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not very good at it. But, and I tell you what, YouTube is the best for learning how to do things. So shout out to YouTube for that. For me, I use the manuscript detective. Inspector Hintz is me, It's kind of a caricature of myself. That's who I use. And basically, she's a book detective.
Very cool.
Yeah. And I inspect your manuscript. And,
I like that.
For example,
I love her blog for that.
Yeah. I did read Jeffrey's book, the first one in the series, the Dawn of Steam series. It's super great. I recommend it to everybody, especially for the early period, like he was talking about getting into the very beginnings of steampunk and the steam era and things like that. So it's super cool.
Very, very cool.
So
very cool. And Jonathan, how about you?
I don't have a persona so much yet. I don't know. I feel like as a writer, it makes more sense just to, whether I'm in cosplay or not, to go as myself, to be myself.
Right.
Because, this is who I'm marketing. As far as that goes. Okay. So I am very much a writer, but I also, that's actually my 3D printer back there. So I'm also a 3D modeler and texture artist. I have my MFA is in animation and visual effects.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so I do model things like, I do model stuff, and once I get some more cartridges for this bad boy over here, I have some ideas for things I want to print. They just, the makers of this is a Cube 3D. Finally, they came out with a material that for supports that washes away. Because one problem is, doing a model and having to tear off all the supports.
Wow.
There's a support material that washes away, so I can't wait to try that. I think it's going to make a lot of things more possible. So, so that's really secondary, I think, to my writing, as far as for me. So that's in that sense, I'm a maker, and I'm also an artist because I'm a 3D artist. So I do the covers. I do the covers.
I love them. I love it.
It's really hard to take you seriously right now. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
Yes. No.
Very, very cool.
This is my buddy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very cool. All right. So I know that we're actually rounding down a little bit as far as time, but for those that are watching, they may not realize that there are different types of punks. I believe you've already spoken about it. There's cyber, there's diesel, there's all these different ones. What would be one of your favorites, Jeffrey?
Well, probably the grandfather of punk as far as names and being recognized as a subgenre of science fiction is cyberpunk. Philip K. Dick, Gibson, Sterling, definitely enjoy those. And that helped to move into some of the others. I mean, the people that we were talking about earlier who were some of the first people who recognized themselves as writing steampunk were kind of adherents of Dick. And I love Gibson for, kind of writing some of the really major touchstone works for both cyberpunk with, as Jonathan was saying, Neuromancer, but also probably my favorite steampunk book, The Difference Engine, co-written with Sterling in the 1980s, is one of the first steampunk books that goes back in its history and creates a setting, does the world building, and introduces a lot of the elements that we consider classic steampunk today.
Very cool. Very cool.
But I'm just starting to do a little bit of writing with Dieselpunk, with my Dieselpunk Julius Caesar and the next Writer Punk. So,
oh my gosh, I have got to check out all of your stuff. It's so cool. Andrea.
Good. Yes, you should. You should check out all this stuff. It's really good.
I mean, all of you. No, God.
My favorite little subgenre, I guess, is clock punk, or like little TikToks. That's my favorite. I wrote a very tiny flash fiction piece. Let me get it out right. That was published, and it was kind of a horror clock punk, and I don't know. I like it because it can be very intricate and detailed, and I like to know about things that tick, and that's one of my favorite little tiny subgenres, if you will, of steampunk. I like all the other ones too, the diesel punks and the cyberpunks. Anything you can punk, the post-apocalyptic punk, dystopia punk, and I don't know.
All the punks.
All the punks. They're all good.
Jonathan, how about you?
Well, first, I just think we should all thank Clark, because if this video goes viral, this is why.
Yes.
Indeed.
You're awesome, Clark. Thank you.
yes.
So, he's wearing the laundry basket on his head. Okay. Yeah, I like them all too. I mean, I started with the first punk, cyberpunk, also in the 80s. Thought that was brilliant. There was like I had mentioned, there was the cyberpunk role-playing game, and I played that a bunch with friends, and that was so fun. We actually got to play one of the first times I played it was with the guy who wrote it, who wrote the game, Mike
That's very
Constant.
cool.
Yeah, it was very cool. And I went with one of my best friends. I met another one of my best friends there. So that was when I was like 19, so it was a long time ago. But yeah, I agree with Andrea. Like all the punks, I am mostly into steampunk. I love steampunk. Once that, it's like just the whole aesthetic. It's so it's so romantic. It's so full of possibilities, and it's so exciting. And so not as much dieselpunk and post-apocalyptic, even though I think they're very cool, but I just haven't really gotten really into them. But I do love the art from them, and not as familiar with stories in those genres. But yeah, I definitely love steampunk the most.
Awesome.
And and for me, one of the challenges with steampunk is coming up with my own ideas for how technology similar to what we have today could exist back then. And having to realize that you need to go with a different set of, you kind of have to make up some of your own rules of science, because it's really what if steam technology were to do this?
Right.
And it's not. So the rules of science would need to be a little bit different for that to be possible. So, and that's one of the things I'm doing in my books. So.
Very cool. Very cool. And guys, we are pretty much out of time. So what I would like to do is say our goodbyes, and you guys tell a little bit about upcoming books, events, releases, and we're going to start with Jeffrey.
Okay, well, the biggest as far as steampunk or punk genres upcoming project would be book 2 in the Writer Punk Press series. Once More Onto the Breach, Shakespeare Goes Punk Volume 2. Introducing my first moving into dieselpunk with dieselpunk Julius Caesar. After doing the Steampunk Winter's Tale in the first one. Can check that out at punkwriters.com.
Very cool.
And that is a charity endeavor. Then I will have a new young adult book coming out in January in my fantasy series. Eventually, we'll be doing more Dawn of Steam as well, which is Regency era steampunk.
Wow.
And since you expressed interest, Andrea and Michelle, I am happy to send you guys reviewer copies
Yes.
of any of the series or any of the writer punk stuff.
I'd love to get that too.
Yes.
I will be very happy.
I really promote my blog a lot. I would love to do that, and maybe interview you guys. I do a lot of interviews on my blog. I haven't done any authors yet, but
yeah, contact me, and I will be happy to hook you up with reviewer copies.
Awesome.
And then you can follow my work and new releases. The website for the group of authors I work with all the time, including one of my favorite Tesla punk writers, Section Tower. But you can check all of us out at clockworkdragon.net.
Very, very cool. Awesome. And I'm excited. I'm excited about my copy. Andrea.
Sorry, I was writing that down. Clockworkdragon.net. Okay. You can find me at themanuscriptdetective.com. You can find me on Facebook, also under The Manuscript Detective. I will be doing Jeffrey's books.
Thank you very much.
More steampunk, and probably going to add a few other things other than just reviewing books, but it'll be steampunk involved. That's my favorite. I'll be contributing to the Writer Punk as an editor, and hopefully that I did in this recent edition, volume 2, and in the future, hopefully I'll have some stories. That's awesome. All for now.
Very cool. Jonathan.
People can visit me on my website. It's johnfesmire.com, JONFESMIRE.com. I've got the one short story I just released, which is sort of a prequel to my novel Bodacious Creed. That I plan to have out I plan to have that out in December next year, the novel. And yeah, I plan to write more stories and have more material to share with my newsletter members as I get it done. And eventually I'll get all that compiled into 1 or 2 books.
All right. Well, guys,
okay.
That's all right. Guys, thank you so much for joining, just coming out today and chatting, and and sharing your knowledge of steampunk. I've learned so much, and I'm sure the viewers have as well. And we would like to just say to all the event comers, and we hope that you have a wonderful time at the event this week, and that you will get out there, discover some new reads, no matter what the fantasy day. But we do hope about Steampunk Saturday.
Yeah, Steampunk Saturday.
All right.
Steampunk Saturday.
Saturday. All right, guys. You all have an awesome one. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Claire.
Bye.